Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Federalist Files. On today's show, Biden's very unimpressive plan to get kids back to school. Biden administration acknowledges their enthusiasm for gun control. More taxpayer dollars being wasted. And finally, the unconstitutional impeachment proceedings.
I'd love your assessment, Brittany, of the Psaki era thus far. Regular briefings are great, but there have been a few times where the White House has seemed to step in it.
Well, Brian, it's been really refreshing to have briefings every day and to even know who the senior officials talking to Biden are. We were not getting that in any of the Trump years, especially in those waning days of the McEnany briefings. And it is refreshing. I do kind of put it towards like having a really bad ex-boyfriend. We were getting essentially abused by Kayleigh for so long, or at least she was calling us fake news and inciting her followers and the followers of the president to not only harass us online, but obviously go to deadly ends for some people.
So there you go. That is, I don't even know her name, Brittany Shepard. She's on Brian Stelter, Mr. Potato Head show. Obviously praising, because our media is so impartial, just praising the new administration's press secretary. I'm going to have a lot of videos for everybody today. Mostly, a lot of them are the press secretary kind of dancing around in circles and not coming to any clear, concise answer on a lot of different questions, as well as just being incapable of answering questions. And just, it seems like they really just don't know what's going on. But those are the sycophants from our media class. That's Brian Stelter and Brittany Shepard. And I don't know at this point if anyone actually even takes, if you take the media seriously, especially a lot of these mainstream CNN, MSNBC, if you take them seriously, I got a bridge that I could sell you. That's all I'm going to say about that. So to start off here, just a quick story. We had the Super Bowl. Tampa versus Kansas City. Tampa ended up winning. Story comes out, I think it's the next day. The mayor of Tampa Bay, Jane Castor, she comes out with some words about people that were not wearing masks. Play clip 2.
Everyone knows that simply wearing a mask dramatically reduces the spread of COVID-19. And I'm proud to say that the majority of individuals that I saw out and about enjoying the festivities associated with the Super Bowl were complying. You know, we had tens of thousands of people all over the city, downtown, out by the stadium, Ybor City, down here in Channelside, and very, very few incidents. So I'm proud of our community, but those few bad actors will be identified, and the Tampa Police Department will handle it.
So that is Jane Castor, that is the Tampa Bay mayor. She's a Democrat. So as always, as you can see up on the screen here, I have a visual. The internet is undefeated. As always, that is her in the stands or in her box office seat that she has around what I would guess to be family members wearing absolutely no mask. So we have these these legacy Democrats that have been around for a long time now. They're just starting to realize that they can really get called out on their crap. This has been permeating now throughout social media. It's been on Twitter. It's been all over the place. And it's just another hypocritical occurrence from the Democrat Party. And another thing I saw, actually, was a bunch of people were tweeting out about Tom Brady winning the Super Bowl and how it's somehow racist to win the Super Bowl because it's Black History Month. And his adversary or his opponent on the field was Patrick Mahomes, which I think is like half black. I don't really understand the whole thing behind. I think that kind of conversation's really at this point just for the absolutely insane people that have to indulge in racial politics all of the time. So next, and more importantly, I have a former Fourth Circuit judge stating that the Senate can't hold impeachment trial after Trump leaves office. So Michael Luddig is his name. That is a former judge of the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. I have a Bongino.com piece. Once again, everything that I refer to will be in the show notes below in the description. It's written by Matt Palumbo. So he starts off here. And this is all quotes first from Michael Luddig. He states, the sequencing of the House impeachment proceedings before Trump's departure from office and the inauguration of the new president, followed by a Senate impeachment trial perhaps months later, raises the question of whether a former president can be impeached after he leaves office. The Constitution itself answers the question clearly: no, he cannot be. Once Trump's term ends on January 20th, Congress loses its constitutional authority to continue impeachment proceedings against him, even if the House has already approved articles of impeachment. So this actually was written before they decided to go through with the articles of impeachment as it went through the Congress or in the House, and now it's at the Senate for them to convict now. And I'm going to explain the law behind this and why this entire impeachment hearing right now is a complete sham. It's a hoax. It is legitimately not real at this point. It is almost just we're just going through procedural steps that don't really make any sense and do not coincide with the Constitution. So, next he states, therefore, if the House of Representatives were to impeach the president before he leaves office, the Senate could not thereafter convict the former president and disqualify him under the Constitution from future public office. The reason for this is found in the Constitution itself. Trump would no longer be incumbent in the office of the president at the time of the delayed Senate proceeding that would no longer be subject to impeachment conviction by the Senate under the Constitution's impeachment clauses, which is to say that the Senate's only power under the Constitution is to convict or not an incumbent president. So, just to be clear, the Constitution itself lays out, and I think it says Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution confirms the view that the purpose of impeachment is to remove from office a president before he can cause further harm. So, most importantly is you can only impeach a president if they currently are in the spot of the presidency. Thus, an impeachment on someone that is no longer president, the president is not an impeachment. It's just, I don't really know what it is. It's all a procedure, and it's just not real. Now, if they actually felt like Trump committed some sort of misdemeanor or felony, they can try to criminally charge him. Now, that wouldn't go through the Senate, that wouldn't go through the Congress, because you can't have the Congress convicting people of actual crimes. That would have to go through a justice system, criminal justice system. Maybe it will in the future. I don't see it being successful if it does. They may do it just for the show of it to make Trump look like a criminal. So, Ludwig, he goes on to, he talks about the Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. The article in the section reads, and I quote, "The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors." Now, further, so the President, Vice President, civil officers, when we mean civil officers, we mean people that work as like ambassadors. We also mean judges as well. So Supreme Court judges are actually, they can be impeached. Furthermore, in Article 1, Section 3, and this is the more important part, it reads, and I quote, "Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States," end quote. So this is the important part here. You cannot impeach a president that no longer, the result of an impeachment is the removal from office. If somebody is not in office, then you cannot impeach them, thus making everything that is currently going on completely illegitimate. And then Alan Dershowitz, they had him on Fox News earlier this week, and he was talking about it, and he was going through the procedure of doing so. He said, okay, so you have Nikki Haley, she was a UN ambassador. You also have people, I think Anthony Kennedy was the name of the last guy that stepped down. He was a Supreme Court justice as well. Those people now, under the rules that our Senate's going with and what our Congress is going with, those people now are liable to be impeached. They can be impeached. Once they have stepped down from the position of civil officer, they are now liable. You can also impeach Mike Pence. If this is the rules that we're going by, you can go ahead. You can impeach Bill Clinton while he's currently not in office. You can impeach all former presidents. That's just what he was going on to say. And that's why it's just not true. It is nonsensical. There is no precedent. There is absolutely nothing to support it in the Constitution, and there is no precedent for it. Now, as for Pelosi desiring impeachment to prevent Trump from running again, Ludwig says, and I quote, "This is incorrect because it is a constitutional impeachment of a president that authorizes his constitutional disqualification. If a president has not been constitutionally impeached, then the Senate is without the constitutional power to disqualify him from future office. End quote. Thus, so since this is a complete sham and hoax of an impeachment trial, it's illegitimate, it's not real. Even if it went through with an impeachment, it's still not going to be recognized by the courts, by the Supreme Court. It's not going to be recognized by the United States of America. It will not be recognized by the Constitution. So this entire thing's just a fraud and a fake. So if Trump really wanted to run in the next election, he could still run even if he was impeached at this point, because this is a fake impeachment trial. And everybody knows it, which is why the Supreme Court Justice the head justice, the Chief Justice John Roberts is not showing up, and he's supposed to be presiding over impeachment hearings. That's also, I believe, that's also in the Constitution as well, or at least if it's not, it's codified in the United States law. Thus, once again, rendering this impeachment a hoax and a fake and a sham and a farce. So now, today, I read a CNN article. They just came out saying that the Senate, or maybe I could pull it up because it makes absolutely, to me, it makes no sense. To me, what it looks like is, okay, the Senate is confirming that this is constitutional. This is a constitutional impeachment, and the vote was 56, I think, to 46, or 54 to 46, something of that nature. And the reason why, I posted it instantly on Facebook. I was like, this is ridiculous. I want to see if anybody even says anything about it. No one said anything about it because no one knows what the actual laws are. And the real problem with it is you cannot have a Senate determine whether something's constitutional or not. Determining something that's constitutional or not, that is up to the judicial branch. That would be up to the Supreme Court. So the senators vote that impeachment trial is constitutional following House managers and Trump lawyer debate. So I don't really understand why they say it's constitutional. What they should have said is they go forward with the confirmation that they're going to do it. They shouldn't say that it's constitutional, because once again, the Senate, the Congress in a general sense, do not determine whether something is constitutional or not. If they did that, then there would be no point of having the Supreme Court there to interpret the law. So it was a 56 to a 44 vote. So you had some Republicans in there. Now this sets, you need a 2/3 vote in the Senate to convict and actually have the impeachment go through, have it confirmed. And 56 to 44 just is not going to crack it. So you had 6 Republicans that actually voted in favor. And Bill Cassidy's one of them. I'm trying to look at if I could find the names. Susan Collins of Maine, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Mitt Romney, no surprise there, of Utah, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, and Ben Sasse of Nebraska. None of those names surprise me. The only one is maybe Bill Cassidy. I've never heard of him, but they're all Rhino Republicans. They're fakes. They're losers to begin with. So next, what I also have, speaking of fake Republican losers, I have Liz Cheney. She's a representative from Wisconsin. She's been speaking out against the president, and this is what she thinks of President Trump.
Of Donald Trump, and does Marjorie Taylor Greene still hold a solid place in that party?
Chris, we're the party of Abraham Lincoln. We're the party of Ronald Reagan. We have to really take a hard look at who we are and what we stand for, what we believe in. I think when you look at both his actions leading up to what happened on January 6th, the fact that he was impeached in a bipartisan fashion, the fact that he lost the presidency, the fact that we lost the Senate, we have to be in a position where we can say we stand for principles, we stand for ideals. Somebody who has provoked an attack on the United States Capitol to prevent the counting of electoral votes, which resulted in 5 people dying, who refused to stand up immediately when he was asked and stop the violence. That is a person who does not have a role as the leader of our party going forward.
So that is one of the most erroneous evaluations I've seen in a while. As it relates to Trump, she's been speaking out about Trump. She's been saying that he's the one that incited violence. All these people that go out and say incitement of violence when it's absolutely incorrect and it can't be proven in a court of law, at this point, are these people liable to defamation suits, considering Trump is no longer the president anymore? So, he could really, I think, if he wanted to, he can go after all of these people and sue all of them for defamation in civil court and probably win. Because now, at this point, he could probably prove that all of his businesses aren't making the same amount of money because of what because of the way he's been falsely labeled by the media, as well as some of his actual colleagues in the Republican Party too, and Democrats as well. So this Liz Cheney, she will be primaried. Hopefully she will get destroyed in the primary. They talk about values, they talk about principles. These people don't have values, they don't have principles. They're rhino Republicans, they're not real. They just go ahead with anything that is going to get them less scrutiny from the mainstream media as well as the Democrat Party. It's obvious, it's been going on for years now. Trump was the first person to go in there and kind of mix it up a little bit. You got to start to understand, he pulled the cloak from these people as you started to understand who it was in the party that were really the swamp creatures. You see Lindsey Graham, not as much as a Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is clearly a swamp creature, which was kind of a known thing there, but now you get to see how crazy the Trump derangement syndrome is from the left, and then also the right. You have some politicians that are worried about the Republican or the rhino base is more worried about Trump's antics. The guy isn't even there anymore than they are about fighting the left on some of this insane legislation that they're trying to push and some of the things that they're saying, which is absolutely, it's just outrageous. And there's nothing, we're more worried about what happened, a month ago, or what happened over the last 4 years. We're talking about the guy that's no longer holds a position in the Oval Office, while the Democrats are just pushing it down our throat right now with 52 executive orders. That's what they have to date from the last time I've seen it. So this is next, actually, here. So I have a video. This is Jen Psaki, press secretary, getting asked about what they're going to do with gun control.
More than 2 million guns were sold in January. That was an 80% jump and the second highest monthly total on record. A lot of this, of course, had to do amid all the coverage related to the Capitol riots then. The president promised to act on day one on this issue. Of course, we know there's only so much he can do by executive action on it.
I will say, as vice president, and even before that, the president took on the NRA twice and won. This is an issue he is personally committed to. Many in this building are personally committed to, and I think he would love to see action on additional gun safety measures to protect families and children, and knows that there is support across the American public for that.
Of course, I guess that's up to him, though, for there to be action. So when would he take action and put some proposal before Congress?
Well, I think we have a couple of proposals currently before Congress, but again, this is an issue he is personally committed to. He has a personal, has worked on it many times in the past, but I don't have a date for you on when there would be a proposal.
That's a pretty rough answer. Near the very end, and you'll notice she does this, Jen Psaki, she'll say, oh, well, he has a personal connection. She almost, I think, said personal vendetta for gun control. Apparently he sized himself up to the NRA twice and he won and he defeated them, and I don't know, it's like a big bragging point from the left to talk about the NRA and talk about how they somehow beat the NRA. Meanwhile, the NRA is still there and people still hate the government. So I don't really know how you would think if they were able to win over the support of the people would actually trust them enough to just hand their guns over to them. But obviously they don't have the support of the people, so they just go after the NRA relentlessly, thinking as if the American people don't support the NRA themselves. And the NRA is only there, it's not because of big corporations or big business throwing money or the gun lobby, because gun manufacturers actually don't even make enough money to really throw at them. It's from individual gun owners that believe in the Second Amendment. So, and this is another misconception that she has, and as well as this reporter, I don't even know who it is, but he goes, oh, well, what does he say? Oh, well, because the Capitol riots, a lot more people went out and they bought guns, 80% up from a normal month. 2 million guns were bought over this past month. And she goes, yeah, the Capitol riot. You think people went out and bought guns because of the Capitol riots? No, that didn't happen. Because if that is the argument that you're claiming, then we should have seen an insane, which we did. We saw somewhat of a skyrocketing of gun sales during the BLM riots as well as the Antifa riots. We saw a lot of gun sales as well. It has nothing to do with that. People were starting to come to terms with the fact that Biden was going to be the president, and they realized they have to go and they have to get their guns because they knew gun control is coming down the pike. It has nothing to do. There's no correlation with the riot at the Capitol building, because the Capitol building was being attacked. Regular Americans that live inside their home didn't see the correlation where, oh wow, they're attacking the Capitol building. They might go after politicians. I'm not a politician, so they probably don't worry about me at all. Whereas you can actually make that argument much more with BLM and Antifa, because you see them burning down small businesses and wrecking people's apartment buildings and their livelihoods. And you go, okay, well, if you're a business owner, that resonates with you. If you live in an apartment, that resonates with you. And then they're marching on the streets in suburban/city areas, that also should resonate with you if you are a homeowner. That would justify, or that would, in your head, you would come much more to terms with going to buy a gun because you're worried about BLM and Antifa moreover than you would be worried about the Capitol rioters. So it's absolutely, the confounding of arguments is absurd here. And Jen Psaki, what I have is she's obviously a known gun grabber as well in her positions, and this is actually pretty hilarious. Now, February 5th, so almost a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago in 2020, she tweeted herself, and she actually, which is pretty pathetic, she got 7 retweets and 72 likes, so like no one even knows who this lady really was at this time when she was tweeting this. She tweeted, "Gun registration, yes, yes, yes. It is a public health emergency, and if any issue gets mothers out to the polls, it should be this one." Now, and that's another argument that she was making, is somehow, and they don't have the statistics obviously to pull them out, but they're like, okay, well, we need more gun control, we need more reform to protect families and protect children. And then if you go back, and they don't have statistics obviously to report how many homicides are children, and then when they pull up those statistics, then you can ask them, oh, okay, so how many of those homicides were children, and were those guns obtained illegally or legally? That's truly at the end of the day, that is always the question, and they will not have an answer for you. And if they do have an answer, it's going to be an extremely minimal. It's going to be a very minute amount of these children or families that are getting shot by guns that are legal. I can guarantee you that it's going to be a very, 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 very small amount. It's going to be minuscule. And it's just this misconception that having a firearm in the house, or just firearms in general, somehow causes mass deaths of children and mass deaths of innocent lives, and as if all of these deaths, and these are legal guns, I'm not talking, and somehow legal guns have a correlation with all of these deaths. Legal firearm use has a correlation with all of these gun homicides, whereas that truly is not the case. The case is it's the illegal firearm use that correlates positively with gun homicides. And that's why they'll never bring up the stats. They'll just use very general phrases, and they won't actually talk about the numbers. So, and this is another one that she has, and this one was like a full 2 years ago almost, or a year and a half ago. September 12th, 2019, I guess this is when Beto O'Rourke was talking about taking people's guns away from them. She tweets, "Thank you, Beto O'Rourke. Take guns, please. No one needs an assault weapon. This is a crisis." So there you go. So they have gun grabbers in our government, and then I love hearing this. The lefties, they go, "Oh, they're not after guns. What are you talking about?" Here it says, "Take guns, please." So I don't know what other answer there is. She says, "Take guns, please." I mean, I don't know what else to think of this. They're not coming for your guns. What are you guys talking about? They're coming for every single system that they're trying to implement right now is to register, and it's to have these stringent checks. And then after all of that's said and done, then you have to keep revamping your membership. They're making it so difficult for you just to deter you from even owning a gun. It's almost like how they deter people from investing in the market because of high tax, and this was years ago especially, is because of the amount of taxation that they hit you with, and then they make it difficult. They make it so difficult, the whole process of going through investing. They do this purposely. They make things difficult for you purposely because they want to restrict your freedom that way by having that deterrent. So next, what I have, the U.S. and this podcast is going to be pretty heavily driven by numbers and just the economic factor right now of what's going on. So the U.S. deficit soared in January amid new COVID-19 relief spending, the CBO says. So that's the Center Business or whatever. It's like the budget office of the federal government. Fox Business article, it's written by Megan Henney. It is in January. The gap between what the government spent and what it collected hit $165 billion, 5 times what it was 1 year ago. So we're seeing a disparity in the amount of spending and the amount of tax revenue that's being taken in. It is a negative disparity. We are building up more and more debt. The CBO said in a report published on Monday, the nonpartisan agency estimated that revenue in January totaled $387 billion, while spending soared to $552 billion after Congress passed the $900 billion aid package. So the $900 billion aid, it's going to be, I guess, so much money is going to be spent each month, and that really tipped the scale. To begin with, we were running a pretty big deficit every single month, whether it was the Trump or it was a Biden administration. Now I think with the Biden administration, we'll probably be running even a heavier disparity or a heavier debt every single month. That's one thing the Trump administration really did not worry about, was the spending. They did not run on cutting the spending, and they did not actually govern by cutting spending either. They just kind of kept it where it was. They didn't cut spending. The most expensive provision in the legislation, the COVID relief bill, was the $142 billion in stimulus checks the federal government delivered in January. Spending on unemployment benefits rose to $34 billion last month from $28 billion in December. Spending on unemployment benefits, which were extended through mid-March in the latest relief bill, jumped to $34 billion last month from $28 billion in December and $3 billion in January 2020 before the crisis began. Payments on emergency rental assistance, meanwhile, cost the federal government $25 billion in January. The largest change in outlays compared with last year's stem from coronavirus legislation, the CBO said. January 2021 is the first month in which there were significant budgetary effects from the additional funding provided for new and existing programs in response to the pandemic, end quote. So we are spending ourselves into a tireless abyss. We are going to continue spending. We're going to continue printing money. I don't even know what the debt is at this point. It's probably around 30 trillion, maybe 35 trillion, around there. And we're just paying more and more into social programs. Now we have another stimulus plan that's going to come through. They approved it, the idea of the $1.9 trillion. They have yet to really write it up. Apparently there's going to be a vote in the middle of March on that. And that's going to be written up by the House of Representatives and then proposed for vote, for approval. We have spent ourselves into an abyss at this point. We're having insane amounts of numbers of spending. We're keeping people out of work to continue the spending. Schools they're not even in action right now. We're not doing anything in schooling because of the teachers' unions, which I'm going to get to that. And there's even more here. For the first 4 months in 2021 fiscal year, which began in October, so technically the fiscal year every single year, it starts in October, it ends in September for the federal government, of course. The federal budget deficit rose 90% to $738 billion, nearly double the $348 billion from the same time period last year. So in the first quarter last year, we had a $348 billion deficit. And that was before COVID, the whole idea of COVID really hit us. Now we pretty much doubled that deficit. And if we're running at that rate, if we're running at the rate of $738 billion every 4 months, so that's every single third, I guess, of the year, then we are going to be running ourselves at a $2.1 trillion deficit every year, which is that number has never happened. Usually it's around $1 trillion. Ever since the Obama administration, we average around $1 trillion deficit every single year, which was being cut down when we lowered the tax rates, because the amount of taxes that were actually coming in through individual taxation was much higher than it was before, because more people were spending money, people were getting paid more money because corporations were saving on taxes. So in fiscal 2020, the deficit ballooned to a staggering $3.1 trillion, smashing the previous record of $1.41 trillion set in 2009. So during the Obama administration, 2009, we had a $1.41 trillion deficit, and this last one, $3.1 trillion. So I just don't know. I mean, that was the last year, all the COVID stuff. We weren't really bringing in any type. The real problem wasn't the amount in that scenario. I mean, the problem is always the spending, but the spending wasn't that much increased. The problem is we weren't taking in the same amount of revenue through taxation, which telling this year, if we continue to keep things closed the way some of these states are, we're going to have some serious ramifications if we're not bringing in what we're supposed to be bringing in revenue in the government. If businesses are not open, they're not making money, money's not flowing through the economy, we're going to have to answer some serious problems in our system. And this is a lot of it's because of blown out spending, and a lot of this now we're allowing college loans not to get paid off, only federal loans though, not private loans. And then apparently if they're going to do the $50,000, they're going to clear people's debt. Apparently that's also only federal loans. So I think private loans, there was a halt on those too. You didn't have to pay those private loans. But when it comes to getting rid of the debt, that has nothing to do with private loans. Only government loans, of course. Now, the deficit is expected to continue its astronomical rise this year as the Biden administration pushes a nearly $2 trillion relief package, including a fresh round of $1,400 stimulus checks. Critics, including former Clinton economic advisor Larry Summers, have slammed the size of the package, but President Biden has maintained the danger is going too small. So there's been a lot of talks of we're only going to give this $1,400 to people that make, and before it was supposed to be, they were talking about $2,000, now it's going to be $1,400, now they're going to give it to people that only make $50,000 or under, and then some are saying they're going to go back to the $75,000. I don't really know exactly what they're doing. All I know is we're spending so much money. If you have money saved up in the bank, I highly advise you actually to invest it at this point, because if you just keep it in the bank, as inflation increases, your money is being devalued. You think that saving it's the smart thing to do, and years ago it used to actually be the smart thing to do when the government was responsible fiscally. But now it's not the smart thing to do to keep your money sitting in a bank account, because you are depreciating your own asset, because the government themselves is depreciating your money by printing more and more money. You're almost better off making investments with some of that money, or maybe try to throw it in with gold, because gold, when there is gold actually in general holds its value. It doesn't really actually increase in value. It has increased in value over the last the last 50 years or so. The reason that is going on, the reason that happens, is because there is such a devaluing and an inflation of the currency that automatically that gold has to rise in price. So it just goes with the inflation, but at least you insure your money, essentially. So if you want to invest in gold, I would highly advise you. I'm not telling you guys what to do with your money. I highly advise you to do that. I highly advise you to invest in stocks as well as cryptocurrency, because cryptocurrency can't be controlled by the government. The more the government prints money out, cryptocurrency actually shoots up in value as they continue to do that, because cryptocurrency is limited in how much there is. So just to, and these are all the things they're doing. They're spending us into an abyss, right? And then the next question that we have, and this is I have another article here talking about the electricity prices, how they're going to increase because of the moving away from oil and moving more towards these other alternatives. But first, we have, I think his name is Peter Doocy. He is from Fox News, and he asks the press secretary a question about the oil rig workers, the guys that were supposed to be working on the pipeline. Do we have a set time for when they will be put into their new job positions in clean energy? Play clip 7.
Thank you, Jen. I do have a question on COVID, but first on energy. When is it that the Biden administration is going to let the thousands of fossil fuel industry workers, whether it's pipeline workers or construction workers, who are either out of work or will soon be out of work because of a Biden EO, when it is and where it is that they can go for their green job? And that is something the administration has promised. There is now a gap. So I'm just curious when that happens, when those people can count on that.
Well, I'd certainly welcome you to present your data of all the thousands and thousands of people who won't be getting a green job. Maybe next time you're here, you can present that.
Like you said,
President Biden has proposed a climate plan with transformative investments in infrastructure and laid out a plan that will not only create millions of good union jobs, but also help tackle the climate crisis. And as the president has indicated when he gave his primetime address to talk about the American Rescue Plan, he talked about his plans to also put forward a jobs plan in the weeks or months following, and he has every plan to do exactly that.
It's funny, the answer is conducive to you. When the reporter asks the question, begs the question, okay, so, well, can we get some sort of a timeline? We just had 11,000 people have been laid off their jobs. Can we get a timeline when they're going to get those jobs that you're talking about, those clean energy union, good paying jobs? And she goes, well, once you get the evidence, you can present that to prove that they're not getting those jobs. And it's like, yeah, but you guys haven't presented any type of evidence or any type of plan yourselves that we're going to have all of these jobs soon. Why would you lay somebody off from their job and then tell them, okay, well, we have a plan? Shouldn't you already have that plan implemented? Weren't you preparing for this for months to have this plan for these clean energy jobs that are obviously not going to yield the same amount of energy? Thus, they're not going to pay as well, obviously, unless if they're subsidized by the government. Wouldn't you have a set plan in place if you're telling other people, okay, well, we have a plan, we're going to lay off all these people, and then they're going to do clean energy jobs? Well, wouldn't you have rather implemented the plan, started going, have some of those clean energy jobs going on, and then transfer those people from one to the other, if that was really your plan? It seems like they don't have a plan, and then near the very end, she starts saying, the coming months, we're going to have something put together. So you guys don't have a plan on this, obviously. It's absolutely reprehensible. They employed at the one signature took away 11,000 jobs from the economy, and then they're also assuming over time it would be around 70,000 jobs with all the different petroleum refineries that would break off and branch off from this pipeline. So they really screwed the American people on this one big time, and I will never back down from this debate and this argument, because this one's worth having jobs being taken away and then telling us that somehow it's going to reduce the carbon footprint. Meanwhile, we're still going to be bringing in and consuming the same amount of oil. We're going to be getting it sent from another foreign country on some sort of a Freightliner cruise ship to the United States, and then in essence they have to pay extra oil to get the oil over here because they have to have a Freightliner bring it to us, and then there's a higher chance of an oil spill, whereas if there's an oil spill on the Keystone Pipeline, at least it's not getting into the water, killing all of the animals or all the fish that are in the water and messing up with the ecosystem there. And there's also a way less. I don't know the last time you heard about a pipeline bursting and having a serious dump of oil like consistently happens in the ocean. So experts say that electricity prices are already rising thanks to practices Biden wants to increase. So this is a Western Journal article. It's written by Jack Davis. So throughout this one, he goes through many experts, all of their different opinions, and then some more explanations on why this is just the idea that this clean energy idea, which they really have not fully thought through, that they're going to attempt to implement, it is disaster. It will be disastrous, and it will be pernicious to just regular working class people. So Biden has said by 2035, which he probably at this point he probably won't even be alive by 2035. It's another 15 years for this guy. He wants the power grid to be net zero in terms of emissions, according to Forbes, with the economy to follow by 2050, according to CNN. Critical pieces of that in terms of the energy sector are increasing use of solar and wind energy. Biden wants to, and I quote, and this is a quote coming from Gregory Wrightstone, executive director of the CO2 Coalition. He states, and I quote, get coal-fired and natural gas-fired electricity prices high enough that then solar and wind become competitive. So what he wants to do is they want to regulate the energy sector and give out government subsidies to artificially enhance solar and wind energy, clean energy. They want to artificially enhance those, and then drive the price up through regulation of coal and natural gas industry to pretty much price them out of the business. So electricity prices are already rising due to Alex Epstein states this, founder and president of the Center for Industrial Progress. The electricity prices are already rising due to, and I quote, wasteful, duplicative solar and wind on our grid. End quote. Electricity prices in Germany have doubled just to get to 33% solar and wind, and they're having all sorts of issues, Epstein said. So we're going to see a mass, and we're already seeing this, it's reflective right now in our oil prices or our gas prices. If you haven't noticed, the gas has gone up recently, partially because of the Keystone Pipeline, and the idea, I think he had an executive order to stop fracking in certain areas, certain lands. And I think he's also getting sued by Native American tribes, because a lot of these Native American tribes actually pay a lot of their finances and some of their social policies off with subsidies that come from the oil industry in a lot of these Native American lands as well. I'm pretty sure they're suing, and I think Texas is suing them for this as well. I think New Mexico maybe too. Or Pennsylvania, I think I read. But we have a bunch of different states suing him, different businesses for this. Because you really, essentially, by the swipe of your pen, you just laid off thousands of people, and you had no issue with it. There's no regret or remorse for this. The answer is, okay, well, we'll just get you to manufacture solar panels. It's like, okay, well, when's that going to happen? Oh, you're going to have to wait. Imagine being told you're laid off from your job, but don't worry, we have a job for you. It's going to be doing this other thing. Oh, okay, sounds good. When will I be doing that? Weeks, months, I don't know. We don't really have the plan implemented yet. We're not sure. So the Biden administration has signaled that it will make offshore wind projects a major priority and will move ahead with the permits for one off the coast of Massachusetts, according to Reuters. In a commentary published by Forbes, Robert Bryce suggested that all the offshore wind energy plans that are now becoming part of the administration's clean energy vision should be taken with a large grain of salt. He wrote, and I quote, "If offshore wind does achieve a huge expansion under Joe Biden, the invoice for that expansion will be equally huge, and price impacts will be felt mostly acutely by low and middle income Americans who will struggle to pay their electricity bills," he wrote. He states next, "The history of offshore wind in domestic waters is replete with canceled plans, cost overruns, cabling problems, and permit delays." So, if you're going to have offshore wind programs, how are you going to transport that energy from one place to another? And that's what he's saying. They had overruns, cabling problems. I don't know if the cables were meant to run somehow underground in the water from that offshore location to, Massachusetts, or if you actually have to have a boat go out there, the boat using oil, using gas, to go out there and then with a big battery charge it up based off of whatever came through that wind power. It's a very antiquated. It's funny because it's like, oh, it's so futuristic. It's really just an antiquated system. The yield that you get from solar panel and wind it is nowhere near what you get from fossil fuels, natural gas, coal. And furthermore, he goes on, offshore wind continues to be one of the most expensive forms of electricity generation. That high-priced juice will cost tax ratepayers untold billions of dollars over the coming years. So this is going to be a huge tax on the lower and the middle class just to be 100%, clean or no net carbon emissions. Meanwhile, the entire world doesn't care, and they're trashing up the world, and America over here only takes up 9% of the carbon emissions. So next he goes on. That means higher cost electricity for low and middle income consumers. The impact will be particularly hard in northeastern states like New York and in New England, where consumers already endure some of the highest electricity prices in the country. Now, then he goes on, Bryce, he continues to talk about major downsides to offshore wind projects that get overlooked. And just before I state this, during the summer, they were going wind, and they were also going with solar in California. In certain areas, I don't think it was 100%, but they were trying to go 100%. Obviously, it didn't work. It didn't work for them. In the summer, they were telling Gavin Newsom had to come out and tell everybody to not use your AC. So that's what was going on. So that is an energy, that is clean energy, is where, oh, don't use your heat, don't use your AC, don't use anything, because we have to preserve, or we have to conserve the electricity. So that's fantastic. If you want to look forward to living that life, have fun, I'll be over here using gas. So next he goes on, building gigawatt scale offshore wind will be lousy for the oceans, navigation, and marine life. The forecast build out of offshore wind in the U.S. will require industrializing vast swaths of some of the most heavily fished and navigated waters in North America. It will require anchoring thousands of offshore platforms along the eastern seaboard, which could interfere with marine mammal migration and wreak navigational havoc during a hurricane, major storm, or oil spill, he wrote. And that's actually very interesting that no one thought about. This can kill the habitat in the oceans by doing this. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if there's a hurricane, there's a major storm, there's actually a chance of these platforms that hold the windmills, of flying off and becoming debris that just gets thrown into the water. Which I didn't even think of this, and that's what he goes through. And it also would kill the marine life. It would kill their entire ecosystem that they have, the mammals or the fish in the water. So Patrick Gleason, writing on Forbes, noted that Biden's plan to increase taxes on corporations is likely to mean that utilities that must pay more in taxes will simply pass those increases along to the consumers. So as soon as you want to regulate the oil industry, you want to regulate any energy sector that isn't clean energy, they will take that regulation and they will just pass on whatever tax it is to the consumer themselves, such as the regular working class person or lower class person. Now, the rich people, this doesn't matter to them. They don't have to worry about it because they have so much money that an extra bill for an extra, $200 every 3 months isn't a big deal to them. So his piece also said that Biden's support for a carbon tax will further hike energy costs. He wrote, and I quote, "These higher energy costs would be borne by all Americans in the form of higher utility bills and gas prices, adding further stress to families struggling to make ends meet and those living below the poverty line." He goes on, "The regressive nature of a carbon tax is a key factor that has led to the rejection of numerous carbon tax proposals at the state level over the past decade, including in blue states with Democratic-run legislatures that should be most inclined to support a carbon tax," he wrote. So, in other words, if you bring in this carbon tax, states have tried to do it, it hasn't worked out. If they did, I'll tell you right now, if there was this carbon tax in certain states, people would just move their businesses out of the states and go to states that didn't care about carbon taxes. So this is just the economic illiteracy from the Biden administration. And here I have, speaking of economic illiteracy, I have Jared Bernstein. This is an economic advisor, and he's talking. He has some question. He got questioned about the $15 minimum wage, and this is what he had to say. Play clip 4.
There's something that a lot of folks have been talking about for a long time, and that is the $15 minimum wage. As you know, Jared, it gained a lot of traction during the campaign on the Democratic side. There's a fascinating study out by the Congressional Budget Office that says it would actually cost 1.4 million jobs by 2025, but would reduce the number of Americans below the poverty line by 900,000. What's your analysis of that, your reaction?
Sure. I mean, with respect, the part you just read leaves out by far, the most important number in that study, which is 27 million people get a wage increase from raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025.
So by increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, 27 million people get a wage increase. That's his argument against 1.4 million people completely losing their jobs. Now, everything's relative. So once the minimum wage is increased, that is going to cause less hours. So people are going to take in less hours of work. Maybe they might make around the same amount of money, but they're going to get less hours. Thus, if you get less hours, you're going to also lose benefits because you're getting less hours. People are going to get laid off as well. Now, the issue with his argument is everything is relative. Once you raise the price of the minimum wage, you raise the price of labor. That either puts businesses out, so people lose jobs that way, or it raises the price of all of the consumer goods, or these workers end up getting less hours. There's many things that can happen. So the 27 million that he's talking about, you guys have to remember, minimum wage, a lot of minimum wage workers are people that are in high school. So when you raise the minimum wage up to $15 an hour, those high schoolers are probably going to be the first ones out because they don't have any actual skills. And you're going to keep adults in there in the position, from what I could imagine here, because at least adults have some sort of working experience. So if we even were giving this minimum wage increase to the younger kids, we're giving a minimum wage increase to kids that live at home, that don't have to pay for rent, don't have to pay for a mortgage. Probably, some of them probably don't even pay for their own car insurance. So we're giving a minimum wage to a couple people. A lot of them probably are populated of kids, which of course he's not going to mention what the populations, what the demographic of that is. And then we're going to lay off a bunch of people with the minimum wage. And then in essence, by having all of these people laid off, guess how they're going to get their money? How are they going to live? They're going to live off the government. They're going to live off welfare. Oh, so who pays into the welfare? Oh, those new workers that just got the raise of $15 minimum wage, they're going to have to pay into the welfare system to pay for all the other people that just got laid off from their jobs. It's tremendous. So that's his economic advisor, Jared Bernstein. He has no clue what he's talking about. Now, Democrats, and I have another one here, Democrats call for temporary Obamacare expansion in coronavirus relief bill. So speaking of another policy that is pernicious to our economy, Megan Henney once again writes this from Fox Business. So it starts off, the coronavirus relief package unveiled by House Democrats on Monday includes a major expansion of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, that would boost premium subsidies already offered under the Obama-era health care law and increase their availability. The bill, a draft of which the House Ways and Means Committee released Monday, would fully subsidize Obamacare subsidies for people earning up to 150% of the federal poverty level and unemployed individuals. The measure would also make Americans earning more than 400% of the poverty level, which is about to them $51,000 per person, or $106,000 for a family of four, eligible for subsidies for the first time, and would cap their premium costs at 8.5%. So now we're expanding, and this has been really truly underreported. I'm surprised I've not really heard this anywhere. We are expanding the Obamacare system now with this new coronavirus relief package, which should have nothing to do with the healthcare program, but now it suddenly does. So 150% of the federal poverty level. So you had to be at a certain level poverty to get a certain subsidy from the government paying for your Obamacare. Now we're expanding it to people that are middle class, $51,000 per person, $106,000 per family. To me, that's kind of more closer to the middle class. They're now eligible for these huge subsidies on Obamacare. So they want to get more and more people on government programs, if you haven't realized, laying people off, welfare program, unemployment programs. They want more and more people on government subsidy programs, and then the rest of us will just continue to work that are in the middle class, and we'll live about at the same level as everybody else that is unemployed. Everyone that's in the middle class working just let's say a $20 an hour job, making maybe $40,000 to $60,000 a year, you in general are going to be living almost in the same living conditions and standards and how much money you get as the person over that's on unemployment and taking a check from the government. The subsidy boosts, which Democrats have sought for years, would only last for 2 years through 2022. So they're going to do this up until 2022. I guess we're somehow looking into the future and we see that COVID-19 is never going to leave us, I guess. I don't really understand the reason for this expansion and for 2 years. Now, the measure would also have the federal government subsidize 85% of COBRA coverage, which allows individuals who lost their jobs to stay on their previous employer's health care through September 21st. So if you lose your job, you will have a government subsidize 85% of your COBRA coverage. So your healthcare coverage, 85% of it will be covered, and it'll still be your previous healthcare from your old employer, and that's going to go up until September 21st of 2021. So that's what, eight months from now. The increased ACA, which is Affordable Care Act, premium subsidies under the House COVID relief plan, along with a new outreach campaign, could supercharge the the upcoming reopened enrollment period and help to reverse recent increases in the number of people uninsured. This is Larry Levitt, a health policy expert at the Kaiser Family Foundation. Now, that's a horrible plan. You're going to have a bunch of people living on government-subsidized insurance, and guess what? When anybody says, they come up to you and they say, oh, I like Obamacare, or I like government-subsidized insurance, just let them know, just say you're welcome, because you're the one paying for it. If you have private healthcare if you're a private healthcare insurer holder, you are paying for it. The subsidies, you are subsidizing their system. They're raising your price an extra 20% because they need to at least break even on all of the people that they're taking through Obamacare, the healthcare providers. Just so everyone, just to make that completely clear, if anybody comes up to you and they say, oh, I like Obamacare, my family, it's helped my family so much, you say to them, you look at them straight in the eyes and you say, you're welcome, because that's from me. I'm the one giving you the subsidy. You're welcome. The government's not giving you anything. I am paying for your health care. You're welcome. So Levitt still says he noted that this is not a permanent solution since the subsidies last for just 2 years, and said that many people will still find premiums and deductibles unaffordable, likely leaving tens of millions uninsured. And that was the big argument that Bernie Sanders always says, they're underinsured or they're uninsured. And he says that because, and he'll say underinsured because it's very easy to classify, like, what does underinsured necessarily mean? Does it mean that you don't have full insurance when you go to see a doctor, where you don't have to, you have no, like me personally, I go to see my doctor, my primary care, I have a $10 copay under my private insurance. It's not free every single time I go. So am I underinsured myself? And I choose, by the way, I choose to have a very cheap package because I'm a young guy. I don't see any chaotic scenarios, any of these contingencies happening in my life where I think I'm somehow just going to have some massive heart attack or something. Now, as I get older, yeah, probably I'll start paying more into my health care. I'll get a better plan, but right now I have a pretty cheap plan. So the provisions are part of a broader relief package that expected to cost around $2 trillion and includes a $1,400 check. Expanding, and this is important, expanded unemployment benefits at $400 a week and $160 billion in vaccine distribution. House Democrats plan to pass the bill using a procedural tool known as budget reconciliation, which will allow them to approve it with their slimmest possible Senate majority. Senate Democrats have not released their version of the bill yet. Lawmakers are eyeing, and this is what I was saying, March 14th is going to be the deadline to approve the package, the relief package. So right now they are extending these unemployment benefits. So you're getting paid $400 a week on unemployment, right? And I think it's extended all the way to September. So 400, let's do the math here. That's about $1,600 a month you're going to be getting. You're making a little bit less than the person that's at the federal minimum wage, if that's what you get paid. It's unbelievable. So we're going to be paying. So I'm going to be sitting here working myself to pay for people that are on unemployment. And you can be on unemployment and then working under the table making money. And there's a lot of people doing that. So here's another question we have for Jen Psaki coming up. When will schools be opening? And at what rate? And will kids be in school? Will it be online? What's going on with that? Are you guys figuring it out with the unions? What's going on? Play clip 1.
Schools swiftly and safely. Could you help us understand what the White House's or what the president's definition of open schools is? Does it mean teachers in classroom teaching, students in classroom, or does it just mean kids in classroom with a remote screen? Help us understand.
Sure. His goal that he set is to have the majority of schools, so more than 50%, open by day 100 of his presidency. And that means some teaching in classrooms. So at least one day a week. Hopefully it's more. And obviously it is as much as is safe in each school and local district.
When you say some teaching, you didn't use the same majority qualifier there. You just have to have some teaching in school, some teachers in school, not the majority of teachers in school and the majority of classrooms.
Well, teaching at least one day a week in the majority of schools by day 100.
Okay, and that's in-person teaching?
In-person teaching, yes.
Everyone knows a huge constituency of the Democrat Party is teachers' unions, which is the reason why they're not pushing this subject. So right now the Democrat Party is putting their voter base above the children of America. and it's been going on for months now at this point. Now there's some teachers that want to teach. There's a lot of unions that want to stop teachers from teaching. They want to hold the ultimate power, which they do. And if you'll notice, if you go on Facebook, you'll go on Twitter, you go on Instagram, you'll notice all of your teachers from high school are heavy Democrat that big time libs that love the teachers union, which I don't really understand why. That in my case, that's how it works. They love the idea of the teachers union. They hate Republicans. They love Dems because they're part of like the establishment there, and they don't want to work. Anyone that's worked in the private industry and then has gone, and I have people that are in my family have done this, they work in the private industry and then they go and do the public job, or they go and they're a teacher in the school system. They say all of the teachers are spoiled brats and they've never worked a real job before in their lives. And that's the truth, because that's what they are. People that have been working, that understand the real life of a private industry and then go to public industry, they realize how much of a joke a public job is and how coddled these people are that have been working public jobs for their entire career. So the constituency of the Democrat Party are these big time unions, and this is a problem they're having in I think it's Chicago. They're doing everything they can to open up, but the Chicago Teachers Union won't show up just because they don't really feel like it. And that's what's going on. And these teachers are making it like they've never left their house before during COVID-19 because they're so afraid of COVID-19. That's not what it is. What it really is you just want to get paid to sit at home, and at the expense of children, and not only kids. But it's also at the expense of the adults, because one adult has to legitimately quit their job to stay home with the child if it's a two-parent working household. So next what I have, and this is the very last article, and then I'll have my litany of articles that I'll go through just real quick. There's a call for domestic flight COVID-19 tests is a horrible idea, according to Delta CEO. New York Post article written by Mark Moore. So recently, it's been stated by the Biden administration, they're talking about administering a test, a coronavirus test for domestic flights. Now, this is something they were doing for foreign travelers, but not for domestic. And he went on the Delta CEO. He called it a horrible idea because it's already such a struggling industry. So he states, and he talks about it in this article, it will not keep domestic flights safer. Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta, stated, asserting that airplanes have high-quality air filters that constantly refresh the air every few minutes to reduce the chance of transmitting the virus. He states, travel domestically in the air transportation system is the safest form of transportation. I think we all know that. Incidents of spread aboard any of our planes is absolutely minimal. In fact, very, very few documented cases globally, not just domestically. So this is somebody that's coming out with, I'm sure he's looked into the numbers because he has to make the case at this point to keep his business going, because there's thousands of people that he employs that are relying on him for them to get their next meal. He states, I think it'd be a logistical nightmare and would set the transportation, not just the transportation and travel industry back, but the whole hospitality sector, the hotels. It would set us back at least probably another year in the recovery, which is true. I think it'd be a horrible idea for a lot of reasons. We're carrying as a U.S. industry over 1 million people a day on average, and that number is starting to grow again, which we like to see. He said the requirement would discourage people from traveling again and have long-term consequences. He states, if anything, it is going to keep people away from what they need to do, which is starting to get back out. For not just essential travel, but people need to start reclaiming their lives, and taking testing resources away from those truly in need, I think would be a terrible decision, which is right. And I do agree, I am very sympathetic to his view here, and this was something that I was saying when they were talking about apparently getting some sort of flight card saying that you don't have COVID-19 and you have to walk around with this thing to go on flights, and you got to walk around with this thing to get into certain thing, to get into venues and things of that nature. My answer to that is that will not work, because people will just mass not comply, and in essence and the businesses don't want to agree to this, because they know if people aren't complying with this, they're not going to show up and pay money to go to a venue or go here or go there to give out their medical. If they have to give their medical information out every single time they go and do something, they're just not going to go and do that event. That's how it's going to work. They're only going to do the minimal, whatever their survival needs, and that's it. In a general sense, yeah, I'm sure there's some people that are willing to do it, but then there's a bunch of other people, especially people that are on the right, on the conservative side, that don't want to give out their information to the government or to any other entity. They will not comply with this. And that's why they don't want to shut down half the business. And I think the Delta CEO knows this. And just some statistics on this. According to the International Civil Aviation Organization, about 1.8 billion passengers took flights in 2020, compared to 4.5 billion in 2019, amounting to a $370 billion loss to the airline industry. So they really actually legitimately need to open back up. We need to get the economy moving again at this point. And I don't know how long they're going to hold our economy hostage. And this is just I have another video here to just prove my point on the $15 minimum wage idea. And this is a local news station covering how Hero Pay ended up putting people out of business. Play clip 8.
Yeah, Brandy, Kroger, which owns Ralph's and Food for Less, making that announcement that they will be closing 2 stores in the Long Beach area because in relation to that Hero Pay ordinance here in the city. And the store here off of East Wardlow, the Ralph's, is among the locations now set to permanently close April 17th. Now, the company, Kroger, saying that both store locations that they've decided to close have been struggling for quite some time, but it describes the $4 salary boost, which applies to some workers, as misguided action that oversteps the traditional bargaining process. The California Grocers Association is among those opposing the ordinance as well, saying it would not do anything to boost the safety of workers, but could actually lead to higher costs for consumers. In fact, the city's saying they are taking the fight to court after that association recently filed a lawsuit to have the ordinance declared unconstitutional. In its statement, the grocery store chain saying the irreparable harm that will come to employees and local citizens as a direct result of the city of Long Beach's attempt to pick winners and losers is deeply unfortunate. We are truly saddened that our associates and customers will be the real victims of the city council's actions.
So Kroger decided to shut down. They had a $4 additional pay according to the ordinance of Long Beach, California, one of the most liberal places in all of America. They ended up closing down because they could legitimately just not run, having to pay people that much. So that is what is going to be seen by an increase in a minimum wage of $15 an hour. Now, at the very end there, most interestingly enough, it seems like the organization for, I think it's like the organization for grocery stores or what have you, they sued the ordinance. And the ordinance is okay with these places closing down and everyone losing their jobs in the town. Like, that's totally, to them, that's fine. Everyone can lose their jobs, and we'll sit there and we'll fight them in court over this. And it's funny because the private industry actually cares more about the worker than the government does. The government doesn't care about the worker. Their answer is, oh, well, we don't care. You guys all got laid off. Big deal. We can care less. And the business end, as well as, I think even they said the bargaining process, the business says, well, the bargaining process shouldn't be taken over by the government. That should be taken over, because I'm sure there's unions there, that should be taken over by the union and management. That's how the system should go. It shouldn't go government fiat. They tell you how much you have to pay your employees. It's unconstitutional by their standard, and that's why they sued. And as you can see, the government just does not care for the private industry, and they also don't care for the private citizen that works a job. They do not, if you haven't noticed, the liberal government hates you if you're working class. They cannot stand you. They use you as a piggy bank to pay everybody else that's relying on the government and their programs, and those people that are relying on the government and the programs continue to vote for them, which is why they take your money, they redistribute it, and they give it to other people. So next, Tucker Carlson. This is the very last video I have. This is Tucker talking about Jen Psaki when they're asked the question of, there's illegal aliens right now that are being released from detention centers and they're not being tested for COVID-19. Check this out.
The Biden administration is releasing thousands of foreign nationals living here illegally into American neighborhoods without bothering to test them for the coronavirus. People from countries with high infection rates, living in crowded conditions, sent forth into the American population like COVID isn't real. That's happening. It is the official policy of the U.S. government. On Friday, the White House was asked about this policy, and here was the response.
The U.S. Customs and Border Protection is saying that they're having to catch and release some migrants without giving them any kind of COVID test. before they're entering the community. So what is being done? What could be done?
Are you suggesting they're letting people in across the border without testing them, or just tell me a little bit more?
They're being released. They're having to, because of the executive order that the president signed earlier this week.
Which executive? Which one?
Everyone just isn't on the same page, so she has no idea what executive order she's referring to, and the reason that is there's 52 at this point. I have an article here, and I'm going to go through all of my headlines here now. And where is it? Okay, so it's my last one. Breitbart article, 52 executive orders and actions already put into place by Joe Biden. I have that. That's February. That's as of February 8th, 2021. So that's probably pretty accurate. So that's the most anyone in the history of America has ever had. And this does not really much have to do with repealing some of Trump's policies, but that's the way he makes it out to be. That's just not the truth. And I think this one is, I'm trying to find exactly which one it was. But yeah, so they're letting people out of the detention facilities, and they're not testing them for COVID-19, this thing that's supposed to be so dire, and we really ruined our entire economy. We put a lot of people out of work. We closed a third of small businesses down over COVID-19. Meanwhile, we're releasing people. It's like there's extra immunities if you are an illegal alien in this country. You are actually afforded more rights than the regular working class American in the middle class. So of these headlines, I also have Antifa, and this one's just more interesting. It's an opinion piece. It's Antifa and the Capitol, A Tale of Two Insurrections. It's a Jerusalem Post article. Everything, once again, will be in the show notes. This one more is just the double standard for riots. All summer we had the BLM and Antifa riots, and it wasn't really a problem. And then you have one riot that happens at the Capitol building, and a majority of the rioters are of the I guess the right, or they were Trump supporters. So it's just the double standard there. It goes into that. Cuomo Health Department illegally withheld COVID nursing home death toll, a judge reports. So this is a New York Post article. It gives some information about the judge really saying that what they did was illegal. I just don't know what the ramifications are going to be. There wasn't anything stating those ramifications. What I think is going to end up happening is this has been a political move by Letitia James, the Attorney General. I think she's going to try to run. She's going to attempt to run as the governor of New York against Cuomo, or try to primary him out of the position. So she kind of got this information on him, and she kind of released it. And this part's actually, this one's really interesting. A Paris court finds France guilty of failing to meet its own Paris Climate Accord commitments. This is hilarious. This is CBS News. So the Paris Climate Accord, all these things that they're supposed to have in place to make sure that they lower their carbon emissions, they have not been doing that. So just a small excerpt here. While the court declared the government guilty of inaction, it rejected a claim for damages by the 4 NGOs that brought the suit, ordering the government to pay just €1 symbolic to them instead. The tribunal also said it would decide within 2 months whether to recommend any measures for the government to resolve its failure to meet its own commitments. So they had these rules. You're supposed to meet this much loss in carbon emissions. They obviously didn't do it, and then people were suing them for it. All these environmental I should call them committees or groups, were doing this. And then the government goes, okay, yeah, you're right. They did not keep their commitments, but our answer is the government has to pay them $1 or €1. The government didn't really care about it. And then they said they're trying to figure out some sort of a system to hold the government to a standard. When the government tries to figure out a system to hold the government to a standard, it's not going to work. It's all wrapped up in bureaucracy. But the real point being from this, the theme is, the United States, out of all countries that were involved in the Paris Climate Agreements, when the United States was not in the Paris Climate Agreements, we had the biggest drop in carbon emissions because we are the most innovative economy, so we don't need to be in the Paris Climate Accord, essentially. And my very last one here, I have the FTC, the Federal Trading Commission, I think that's what they're called. That's the acronym, found Amazon used customer tips to act as employee wages. This is an NTD article, and this one's hilarious. The FTC ruled against Amazon on Tuesday on claims that the company withheld tips from certain drivers. Amazon will pay close to $62 million to flex delivery drivers. The FTC said that Amazon has told customers it would give tips to the drivers. Instead, it withheld the money during the more than 2-year period. Wow. So I guess they were telling people that would call in and say, oh, I like my Amazon driver, he's doing a really good job delivering my packages, I want to give him a Christmas tip. And then the answer to them was, oh, don't even worry about giving him a Christmas tip. We hook them up during Christmas time for, all the whatever they do. And it turns out they didn't give any of them any type of Christmas bonus. So now they're liable to $62 million in payments to flex delivery drivers, because that's how they treat their workers. So that'll conclude this one. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. Please make sure you check out some of the Federalist Paper podcasts, and continue to watch these. I try to cover as much as I can, but this news really was a little drier. There's not as much coming through ever since Trump hasn't been in, because the media also doesn't want to report any type of malfeasance, so it's kind of harder to get information to begin with too as well. But they don't want to report anything bad that's going on, and there's a lot of bad probably going on that they don't want people to know about. They just want to fawn over celebrities and things of that nature. So I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in. Please try to use some of these sources. Let your friends know. Share, share, subscribe the podcast. Drop the mic, as in my name, Mike. Drop the mic on people. Let them know about the podcast. I greatly appreciate it. Everybody have a good night.